1943. A windowless room inside 84 Avenue Foch in Paris. A British agent sits restrained in a chair, wrists bound, posture forced into stillness. He has already been searched 3 times, his pockets emptied, his shoes removed, his belt taken away. The Germans are methodical. They always are. They believe they have found everything. Everything except the 2-inch blade sewn invisibly into the lining of his jacket lapel. This is the story of Britain's smallest weapon of the Second World War. A blade so small it weighed less than 40 grams. So discreet, it could survive even the most thorough security search. And according to the combat doctrine that created it, lethal enough to cause unconsciousness within seconds if it struck the right vessel. The lapel knife was never meant to win fights. It was never designed for combat in the traditional sense. It existed to create disruption, a violent interruption, a split second of opportunity when all other options were gone. By 1941, Britain's Special Operations Executive faced a problem no conventional weapon could solve. Their agents were being sent deep into occupied Europe carrying pistols, explosives, radio transmitters, forged documents, and false identities. They were trained to sabotage railways, organize resistance, and transmit intelligence under constant threat of discovery. Britain had equipped them well, but the moment an agent was captured, all of that equipment vanished. German security forces were experts at searching prisoners. The SD, the Gestapo, the wider security apparatus, whatever name they used, their methods were brutally efficient. They stripped prisoners, examined clothing seams, checked shoes, belts, watch straps, collars, anything that might conceal an object. And once the search was complete, the interrogations began, across occupied Europe. The interrogation had been refined into a system: Avenue Foch in Paris, Prince Albrechtstrasse in Berlin, regional headquarters in every occupied capital. Prisoners were subjected to sleep deprivation, beatings, isolation, and psychological pressure. The goal was always the same: names, addresses, radio frequencies, safe houses, supply routes. One confession could collapse an entire network. Some agents broke, some resisted until death, but almost none escaped. An unarmed prisoner, restrained inside a guarded building filled with enemies, had no realistic options. That reality forced so to confront a brutal truth. Their agents needed something that could not be found, something small enough to survive a full search, something that could be used even while restrained. A last possibility when all others were gone. They turned to 2 men who understood violence not as theory, but as lived experience. William Fairbairn and Eric Sykes arrived at Station 12, Aston House. In late 1940, Fairbairn had spent over 2 decades in the Shanghai Municipal Police, patrolling some of the most violent streets on earth. His body carried scars from countless encounters. He had studied jiu-jitsu, Chinese martial arts, boxing, and street fighting, shaping them into a brutally efficient system designed for survival at close range. Sykes had worked beside him, training elite marksmen and specialist units. Together, they had already designed the Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife, the iconic 7-inch dagger that would become synonymous with British commandos. But that blade was too large. 7 inches of steel could not survive a proper search. It would be found in a boot, a sleeve, a trouser leg. So they went smaller. Much smaller. According to Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Cardew, commanding officer of Station 12, the 2 men developed what became known as the lapel knife during their time at Aston House. Curiously, Fairbairn's official service record lists nearly every weapon he designed, yet makes no mention of this one. Some historians believe Eric Sykes played a greater role in its creation. One private collector claims to possess a lapel dagger bearing what appears to be Sykes's personal Chinese chop mark. Though such claims are difficult to verify, what is certain is that the weapon existed and that it was intentionally kept obscure. The design was brutally simple: a blade between 1.5 and 2.5 inches long. No handle in the conventional sense, only a narrow grip roughly the width of a thumb. Some examples were double-edged, others sharpened along a single edge with a false edge opposite, but total length rarely exceeded 4 inches. The weight was around 40 grams, lighter than a modern phone, smaller than a pen. The true innovation lay in the sheath, made of thin metal or leather. It featured small holes along the edge so it could be sewn directly into clothing, inside a jacket lapel, along a shirt collar, within a trouser seam, hidden inside a coat lining. Once stitched in place, the knife became part of the garment itself. Later accounts suggest that much of the manufacturing was handled by H.G. Long of Sheffield, while leatherwork may have been produced by Arthur Akers, a local cobbler in the village of Aston. Some versions included a small cord loop that slipped around the finger, ensuring the blade could not be knocked away during a struggle. Several variants existed: the compact lapel knife, a longer sleeve dagger designed purely for thrusting, a curved insole blade hidden inside a shoe and retrieved by pulling a concealed thread. All were finished in matte black to avoid reflection. All were designed to vanish under inspection. Training to use these weapons was conducted with equal seriousness at facilities such as Arusig in Scotland and Bowlu in Hampshire. Instructors introduced what Fairbairn called the timetable of death. This chart mapped the human body, identifying major arteries and estimating how quickly unconsciousness or death might follow if they were severed. The carotid artery in the neck, just beneath the skin, the subclavian artery beneath the collarbone, the femoral artery in the thigh. Students memorized these diagrams and practiced the motions repeatedly until they became instinctive. Speed was everything. The margin between survival and failure was measured in seconds. The grip was precise. The blade held between thumb and forefinger, the cord looped around a finger to prevent loss. Movements were sharp, economical, and brutally efficient. Trainees practiced on dummies, sandbags, even sides of beef. The goal was not elegance, but reflexes later. Rex Applegate, Fairbairn's American protégé, would admit that the so-called timetable of death was medically optimistic. Its purpose was not accuracy, but psychology. Agents needed confidence. They needed to believe that even if captured, they still possessed a chance, however small. The scenario imagined by instructors was grimly specific. A prisoner restrained during interrogation, hands cuffed but not immobilized. A guard standing, cliff, a moment when attention faltered, a hand rising as if to adjust clothing. A sudden movement, a flash of steel, chaos. Not escape, guaranteed, only disruption. A chance to reach a weapon, break free, or reach a doorway. In a building full of enemies, that might be all an agent could hope for. History, however, offers no confirmed example of a lapel knife being used in this way. Despite extensive research through declassified files, memoirs, and post-war interrogations, no documented case exists. The image of a captured agent slashing his way free remains largely a legend. What is documented is resistance using whatever tools were available. Frank Pickersgill, a Canadian SOE agent, captured in 1943. He attempted to escape from SD headquarters the following year. According to post-war investigations led by Vera Atkins, he attacked guards with a broken bottle, killing at least one, before being shot after leaping from a window. Another agent, Michael Trotobus, reportedly killed and wounded attackers during a raid, before being killed himself. The weapons used remain unclear. This absence of evidence does not mean the lapel knife was never used. It reflects the nature of so itself. Records were deliberately destroyed. Missions went unrecorded. Survivors were sworn to silence. Even the organization's official historian, M.R.D. Foote, worked under restrictions so strict he could not discuss his research. At home, much of what truly happened vanished with the people who lived it. What can be said with certainty is that the weapon existed, was issued, and served a psychological purpose unmatched by any other tool of the war. It was insurance, a final option, something no enemy could completely take away. When the United States formed the Office of Strategic Services in 1942, it adopted British methods almost wholesale. OSA's agents received the same concealed blades, the same training philosophy, the same understanding that survival sometimes depended on a single, desperate moment. At Station 15, the final staging point before deployment, tailors worked with surgical precision. Clothing was modified to match local fashion. Stitch patterns were adjusted to avoid detection. Fabric was chosen to match regional production methods. German searchers knew British tailoring techniques. One misplaced stitch could betray an agent. The knife, once sewn incorrectly, became invisible, a part of the garment, a part of the person. Today, original lapel knives are exceedingly rare. The Imperial War Museum holds a few examples alongside other clandestine devices. Auction houses occasionally list pieces claiming wartime provenance, though genuine examples are vastly outnumbered by reproductions. Unlike the millions of fair fighting knives produced, the lapel knife was never meant for mass recognition. It was meant to disappear. Yet its meaning endures. The lapel knife represents something far larger than its physical size. It reflects a philosophy that defined British irregular warfare, that ingenuity could overcome disadvantage, that even in captivity, agency could survive, that no one should face their end completely helpless. When Winston Churchill ordered the creation of the Special Operations Executive in 1940, he demanded that Europe be set ablaze, but some of that fire burned quietly. It existed in the resolve of individuals who knew they might never return, in the hidden seams of their clothing, in the silent confidence that even when captured, even when alone, they were not entirely powerless. The lapel knife was not meant to change the course of the war. It was meant to give one human being a final chance, a moment of choice, a flicker of control in a world designed to crush it. And in that sense, more than any weapon of its size, it represents the quiet defiance that defined Britain's secret war. Yet for all its secrecy, the lapel knife also revealed something deeply human about the men and women who carried it. It was not simply a weapon sewn into cloth, but a quiet acknowledgement of fear, isolation, and uncertainty. Every agent knew the odds. Capture did not mean imprisonment alone. It meant isolation, pain, and the slow erosion of identity. The knife existed not to encourage violence, but to preserve dignity in a world designed to strip it away. It was a final assertion that even under total control, the individual still possessed agency, however small. Many agents later described an unusual comfort in knowing the blade was there. Not confidence in victory, but reassurance. It was a reminder that they had not been abandoned. That somewhere beyond enemy lines, people had thought carefully about what they might face and had prepared for it. The lapel knife represented planning in its most intimate form, not strategy drawn on maps, but empathy shaped into steel. It acknowledged fear without surrendering to it. In training, instructors often reminded recruits that the weapon was never meant to guarantee survival. It existed to create possibility, a chance measured in heartbeats, a disruption just long enough to change fate. In that sense, it embodied the moral complexity of clandestine war. It was neither heroic nor cruel by design. It simply existed because reality demanded it, as the war drew toward its end. Many of the people who had carried these knives disappeared into anonymity. Some returned home quietly, never speaking of what they had done. Others never returned at all. Their stories dissolved into sealed files, half-remembered testimonies, and fragments preserved only in archives and whispered recollections. The knife, like the people who carried it, slipped into obscurity. Yet its meaning endures because it represents something universal. The refusal to surrender agency in the face of overwhelming power. The determination to retain choice when every option has been stripped away. In that sense, the lapel knife was never truly about killing. It was about dignity under pressure, about maintaining the possibility of action when all control had been taken. Today, when historians examine the quiet tools of the Second World War, the lapel knife stands apart, not because of how often it was used, but because of what it symbolized. A silent promise sewn into cloth, a final measure of independence, a reminder that even in the darkest rooms of occupied Europe, even under the weight of fear and uncertainty, the human will could still resist being completely extinguished. That is why the lapel knife still matters, not as a weapon of war, but as a symbol of quiet defiance. A reminder that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it hides patiently, waiting for the moment it might be needed and hoping it never is.